who were in.
Wow.
Anyhow, I won't go further. I want to give other people a chance to talk. Yeah.
I would love to hear more about it. Well, I think we're close to the time that we're going to start. Now, let me apologize immediately. If at any point the internet goes out, if the Wi-Fi service goes out, I will just come back and continue to the best of my ability, okay? All right.
Sounds like a plan. I say we wait just a couple more minutes and then we'll get started.
Life is capricious, it's very fickle. We all understand that, and the internet is equally so.
Yeah.
So, with only 5 people, we don't have to have, I want to look at the other options here.
Stop experimenting.
So like this looks better to me because you are the speaker and, people like to see your face, and if we get a whole bunch more people in, we'll put you back on the grid. Does that sound okay?
The simultaneous framing is just perfect. I still think it's perfect. It's very democratic.
Yeah, I guess.
You just don't want to see you drinking and fidgeting. That's all it is. You want to avoid that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay, then curtail. See, I have an idea. Get a sippy cup, okay? Get a red cup, get a straw, and put your mysterious beverage inside there, that elixir that keeps you happy, that ambrosial beverage, put inside there, and then nobody has to know that you're having any spirits.
How do you do the squares? Where do you go down here to have these frames?
We don't touch anything. We don't ask.
Oh, I'm not going to touch anything. I'm asking him.
Don't touch anything.
What do you want? What do you need?
No, I want you to tell me, how do you get people like in the windows like that? Is there anything down here that you touch to do that?
Your view. You can select your view. I think it's on the top.
Top right.
Yeah.
It looks like a little machine.
Oh, I see it.
You see it now? Okay.
Mhm. Only because I have meetings like this with my church, and we haven't, I'm learning this, so we just go one-on-one, and this is nice. I like this because you can see everything.
Hello, your microphone has to be turned on.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear. No, I hear you, Edna. I was talking to Nancy. Hi.
Oh,
Hi, you want me to unmute? Most of the time they want people muting the minute they come in.
No,
This is a progressive Zoom. Usually, unless it's a class, they want you muting the minute you come in, because it's all this background noise and all this.
This is a community.
Exactly.
It's a community, yeah.
I believe in the communal approach. Okay, so James,
Yep.
it is my contention that we should start. What do you think? I don't think we should penalize folks who are coming in early.
Yeah, sure. Hold on one second.
It was 6:07 too, so it's
exactly.
past the 6:05 courtesy 5
Exactly.
minutes.
Right.
Well, I mean, once Bob starts, I think people should mute, to be honest.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they have the respect
Of
for it.
course.
I mean, there's some background music where I am, and I don't,
Right, but I
Is
am
it-
going to
It's
ask
like-
you guys.
it's 80s stuff, and I love it, but it's not going to
Yes.
go with this.
I thought maybe it was Wagner's The Ring cycle. Okay, let's see here.
Those 80s.
Okay,
It's different 80s.
1980s.
It's a little bit before my time.
All right.
Anyway,
So here we go. I'll introduce you and then we'll get going, okay?
sure.
All right, let's see here. That's relaxing classical. Okay. So I want to welcome everybody out to to our February meeting of the New York Browning Society 2022. We have a fantastic speaker lined up for today. He's been with us over the last few seasons. Some of the more memorable events at the National Arts Club, where we had the opportunity to invite and have children from the local high schools participate. They always look forward to seeing Bob speak. Hopefully in the future, we will be able to do that again as well. Bob McNeil, he's a writer, editor, cartoonist, and spoken word artist. He's the author of Verses of Realness, available at undergroundbooks.org. Hal Sierowitz, a former Queen's Poet Laureate, called the book a fantastic trip to the mind of a poet who doesn't flinch at the truth. Among Bob's recent accomplishments, he found working on Lyrics of Mature Hearts to be a humbling experience because of the anthology's talented contributors. Copies of that collection are available wherever better books are sold. Lyrics of Mature Hearts, a poetry anthology. So without further ado, we want to welcome our speaker, Bob McNeil, for his talk entitled Verses and Justice, Words of Protest from Elizabeth Barrett Browning and other democracy speaker. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Bob McNeil.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. First and foremost, let's give James Browning Kepple and the New York Browning Society a round of applause for making this program possible. Come on, guys. Is that the best you can do?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Furthermore, folks in the audience, give yourselves a round of applause for supporting the arts, please. Very good.
I'm holding my
Now-
smartphone, so it's one.
I'm sorry?
I just said
I
I'm holding my
can't see.
smartphone, so I have to do the jazz clap with one, or the jazz
Oh,
clap
yeah,
with
okay,
one hand.
right, like the beatniks. Yes.
This one, yeah.
And I can't
Okay.
see Nancy in the view. I can't see her up there.
That's fine.
Let's continue. Right. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I am Bob McNeil. I will humbly serve as your featured guest speaker. Throughout this program, you will hear poetical and historical information. Case in point, given Elizabeth Barrett Browning's wealth from her family's plantation that used slaves, she was an unexpected proponent for the freedom of Black people. Nonetheless, she dedicated her muse to a revolutionary cause in a couple of meritorious poems titled "A Curse for a Nation" and "The Runaway Slave at Pilgrim's Point." I will share the aforesaid poems as well as other cause-oriented compositions by Elizabeth. Additionally, aside from the Victorian writer's work, this program acknowledges other important figures who shared similar views on the subject of oppression. Once again, this poem is titled "A Curse for a Nation." I heard an angel speak last night, and he said, "Write, write a nation's curse for me and send it over the Western Sea." I faltered, taking up the word. "Not so, my lord. If curses must be, choose another, to send thy curse against my brother. For I am bound by gratitude, by love and blood, to brothers of mine across the sea, who stretch out kindly hands to me. Therefore the voice said, shalt thou write my curse tonight? From the summits of love a curse is driven, as lightning is from the tops of heaven." "Not so," I answered evermore. "My heart is sore for my own man's sins, for little feet of children bleeding along the street, for parked up honors that gainsay the right of way, for almsgiving through a door that is not open enough for two friends to kiss, for freedom of love, which abates beyond the straits, for patriot virtue starved as vice on self-praise, self-interest, and suspicion, for an oligarchic parliament and bribes well meant. What curse to another land assign, when heavy sold for the sins of mine? Therefore the voice said, shalt thou write my curse tonight, because thou hast strength to see and hate a foul thing done within thy gate. Not so, I answered once again, to curse choose men, for I, a woman, have only known how the heart melts and the tears run down. Therefore the voice said, shalt thou write my curse tonight? Some women weep and curse, I say, and no one marvels night and day. And thou shalt take their part tonight, weep and write. A curse from the depths of womanhood is very salt and bitter and good. So thus I wrote and mourned indeed, what all may read, and thus, as was enjoined on me, I send it over the Western Sea, the curse. Because ye have broken your own chain with a strain of brave men climbing a nation's height, yet thence bear down with brand and thong on souls of others for this wrong. This is the curse, right? Because yourselves are standing straight in the state of freedom's foremost acolyte, yet keep calm footing all the time on writhing bond slaves for this crime. This is the curse, right? Because ye prosper in God's name with a claim to honor in the old world sight, yet do the fiend's work perfectly in strangling martyrs for this lie. This is the curse. Right. Ye shall watch while kings conspire around the people's smoldering fire, and warm for your part shall never dare. Oh, shame, to utter the thought into flame which burns at your heart. This is the curse. Right. Ye shall watch while nations strive, with bloodhounds die or survive, drop faint from their jaws or throttle them backward to death, and only under your breath shall favor the cause. This is the curse. Right. Ye shall watch while strong men draw the nets of feudal law to strangle the weak, and counting the sin for a sin, your soul shall be sadder within than the word ye shall speak. This is the curse. Right. When good men are praying erect, that Christ may avenge his elect and deliver the earth, the prayer in your ears said low shall sound like the tramp of a foe that's driving you forth. This is the curse. Right. When wise men give you their praise, they shall praise in the heat of the phrase, as if carried too far. When ye boast your own charters kept true, ye shall blush for the thing which ye do. Derides what ye are. This is the curse. Right. When fools cast taunts at your gate, your scorn ye shall somewhat abate, as ye look o'er the wall for your conscience, tradition, and name, explode with a deadlier blame than the worst of them all. This is the curse. Right. Go wherever ill deed shall be done. Go plant your flag in the sun beside the ill-doers, and recoil from clenching the curse as God's witnessing universe with a curse of yours. This is the curse. Right. Thank you. Thank you. You know, to get into character, I shaved my mustache and ate scones. That's a fact. True story. Question. All jokes aside, do you think the poem effectively castigates a nation known for whipping, raping, mutilating, and destroying the cultures of African slaves? I want your input at this point. So please, let's engage. I want to hear your viewpoint. Anyone? Don't answer all at once now.
I think it does.
Okay.
I think it
Elaborate.
does. I think it does in the language and context of the time. It's very sharp. It's very,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, just the use of the word curse,
Right.
you know, and right.
Which at that time really meant something.
Right, curse, and right. And the repetition and the emphatic repetition.
Yes.
Definitely. I think when I say for the times, what's very interesting is now I don't know. I do know. I know some of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's background, but I don't. You said that her family did own slaves.
Yes, absolutely. They had a plantation, but she was adamantly against the idea.
Right. Yeah. I think that what I like about it is about the poem that you do not find in the milder sort of regrets of this, the quote, necessary evil, unquote, that you've heard plantation owners often, you know, lament. And you think if it's evil, why is it necessary?
Understood. Unfortunately, I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
No, I'm sorry. The young lady was speaking. Nancy was speaking. Yes. Nancy? Sorry, Nancy, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. What happened? I had a call coming through that ended up being a scam, and so I silenced it. But what I was thinking of is that for someone who was in this situation, you know, living on a plantation with slaves, and I've sometimes, I teach political science, and I've sometimes said to my students, it's not a great parallel, but it's kind of a bad parallel, but the only one I can think of is that in more distant ways now say, if in fact we're using more than our share of the world's resources, which one could argue we are, and if over time that's going to mean extreme food scarcities and that people in the global south are going to be starving and, water shortages and all these things, 300 years from now, if the planet's still around, are people going to say, how could people in, the global north do this to other people? And we even say, oh, we're wasteful people, we consume too much, but we don't really stop because we're in this net somehow.
Right, the eye of the storm, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And what I admire about Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem is that I think she takes a huge step toward trying to break out of that net, even though she's still in it.
Exactly.
Right,
by rebelling against her family and tradition.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well said. Anybody else, briefly?
Okay.
Kurt.
Yeah, I thought it was very effective, and I noted some techniques that her husband uses in Love Among the Ruins. That you have a certain focus, and all of a sudden it rapidly shifts to something else, and you have to find your grounding, and it does that. It keeps punching away in that fashion, and so I think it's timeless.
Agreed. And anybody want to comment on my attempt at an English accent? Thank you. All righty, so let's proceed.
Excuse me. Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Can I just mention one thing?
Sure.
I thought the English accent was wonderful. I mean, it was exact. It was absolutely impeccable. I'm curious as to what it would sound like if you read it in your own voice.
Oh,
If it would be different. Sorry?
Oh, it'd be dreadful. Let me save you a lot of time right now.
No, you have a wonderful voice. You have a
Well,
wonderful.
you'll hear that later on in other poems.
Okay, yeah, and the only reason I say that is that I felt it was very effective, and yet I sometimes wonder. I've heard this happen with women who will sing what I call real alpha songs, like cowboy songs and ranching songs and things, but in some who try to kind of imitate the more masculine voice and tone, and some who just sing it in their own voices. And surprisingly, the lyric voice carries it. The nuance is very powerful. And I just wonder, how it would be to hear you read it in your own voice. The accent was impeccable, as I said, but I just would be very curious about that.
Okay. You're going to hear other pieces, and I'm going to utilize my voice, and I will give it back to the person I borrowed it from at some point. Okay, awesome.
Sounds good.
Okay, very good. Let's see now, where are we? We are now up to this. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, an African-American abolitionist, suffragist, poet, teacher, public speaker, and writer, saw the evil of a duplicitous nation that called itself democratic, but engaged in tyranny. Her poem, The Slave Auction, expresses the horrors very well. The sale began. Young girls were there, defenseless in their wretchedness, whose stifled sobs of deep despair revealed their anguish and distress. And mothers stood with streaming eyes and saw their dearest children sold. Unheeded rose their bitter cries, while tyrants bartered them for gold. And woman, with her love and truth, for these in sable forms may dwell, gazed on the husband of her youth with anguish none may paint or tell. And men whose sole crime was their hue, the impress of their maker's hand, and frail and shrinking children too, were gathered in that mournful band. Ye who have laid your love to rest and wept above their lifeless clay, know not the anguish of that breast whose loved are rudely torn away. Ye may not know how desolate are bosoms rudely forced apart, and how a dull and heavy weight will press the life drops from the heart. Thank you. The idea of racial appropriation being offensive was non-existent in the Victorian age. Knowing this, some of my contemporaries criticized Elizabeth's poem, The Runaway Slave at Pilgrim's Point, because she did not truly understand the plight of Black slaves. There is some truth to that argument. I, not being an apologist, must state some of the lines in that verse are highly objectionable. Written from the point of view of a Black woman who bore the child of her master, an ignominious rapist, the composition makes readers realize the cruelness of slavery. This is an excerpt from Elizabeth's oft criticized but well-meaning poem. I see you staring in my face. I know you staring, shrinking back. Ye are born of the Washington race, and this land is the free America. And this mark on my wrist, I prove what I say. Ropes tied me up here to the flogging plates. You think I shrieked then? Not a sound. I hung as a gourd hangs in the sun. I only cursed them all around, as softly as I might have done my very own child. From these sands up to the mountains, lift your hands, O slaves, and end what I begun. Whips, curses, these must answer those. For in this union, you have set two kinds of men in adverse foes, each loathing each, and all forget the 7 wounds in Christ's body fair. While he sees gaping everywhere our countless wounds that pay no debt. Our wounds are different. Your white men are, after all, not gods indeed, not able to make Christ again do good with bleeding. We who bleed stand off. We help not in our loss. We are too heavy for our cross and fall and crush you and your seed. I fall, I swoon, I look at the sky. The clouds are breaking on my brain. I'm floating along as if I should die of liberty's exquisite pain. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let me just get a moment here. If Elizabeth Browning's statement, true knowledge comes only through suffering, then Frederick Douglass was a polymath. As a slave, he suffered indeed. Thankfully, he escaped his bondage. Armed with experience and wisdom, he fought for abolitionism. His justified anger resides in this speech. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sound of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shout of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. Thank you. I know this program is supposed to use verses, but that speech has all the lyricism of any prose poem. Do you guys agree? I would love to hear your opinions. Anybody? Let me hear from some other folks. Anybody want to engage? Young lady? Sorry. Anybody else want to engage?
Frederick Douglass obviously is an
Yes, sir.
immaculate speaker and writer, so
Yes.
that's not really the question at hand. My question was thus, well, and I usually save these towards the end, but
Yes, I understand.
see that Herb's having a drink, so I'll have one as well.
Yeah. I envy you guys. I have
But
to stay sober.
The one little point that I wanted to bring out in regards to before the Frederick Douglass, in which you were saying that Elizabeth was very criticized, and then I suppose this is in modern times.
Yes.
First of all, we have to say that one, she did not live on a slave plantation.
No.
She had no idea of any of the events about what her family had done in the past. She was not a part of that or supported that in any way.
No, I know that imply.
And as Elizabeth was one of the first, popular abolitionists and feminists at that time, she was also the top-selling poet at that time.
Oh, absolutely.
So her voice in Pilgrim Point was a giant call to show light on the plight of the slaves. Thus the refrain, if you remember, it was right, because no one else was writing about it. And she had the balls and the courage to stand up and saying that this is something that mattered. And it was that Pilgrim Point that really rolled into a lot of this other stuff. So it's easy to criticize someone in the modern and say, well, Elizabeth couldn't have done this, but the truth is, if Elizabeth wouldn't have stood up and said what she said, then, it would have, it was just a big turning point in that movement with that poem. So I think that she should be given some credit as opposed to some criticism. That's all.
Okay, but we're offering both sides, and that's a very good point. I have to concede that. Anybody else want to jump in? Okay, so let's take it from there. Let's move on.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say that.
Oh, yes,
the thing
please.
is, I think about the criticism. I take criticism of something like this, not so much criticism of her intent, but more situating it within context.
Mhm.
I think that is valid, so that we see also that what she, as James, I think that's it, no, Herb, no, the gentleman who just spoke, that you're right, for any time, but particularly for her time, what she did was incredibly pioneering and
absolutely
radical. As was Aura Lee and so much of what she wrote, but putting it within the context for someone who might not see it as radical as it was really. And I think that's the point of what we might call a critique, maybe more than a criticism.
Understood. Right.
Sort of add that.
Or just revisionist history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes.
All right. Which I sincerely hope I'll never be accused of at all. Hold on for one moment. Let me see where we are in our program. Okay. Now, the Brownings and John Greenleaf Whittier were friends. They also shared a mutual hatred for slavery. John's poem, Astrea at the Capitol, proves this fact. When first I saw our banner wave above the nation's council hall, I heard beneath its marble wall the clanking fetters of the slave. In the foul marketplace I stood and saw the Christian mother sold, and childhood with its locks of gold, blue-eyed and fair with Saxon blood. I shut my eyes, I held my breath, and smothering down the wrath and shame that set my northern blood aflame, stood silent. Where to speak was death. Beside me gloomed the prison cell, where wasted one in slow decline, for uttering simple words of mine, and loving freedom all too well. The flag that floated from the dome flapped menace in the morning air. I stood a periled stranger where the human broker made his home. For crime was virtue, gown and sword and law their threefold sanction gave, and to the quarry of the slave went hawking with their symbol bird. On the oppressor side was power, and yet I knew that every wrong, however old, however strong, but waited God's avenging hour. I knew that truth would crush the lie. Somehow, sometime the end would be. Yet scarcely dared I hope to see the triumph with my mortal eye. But now I see it in the sun. A free flag floats from yonder dome, and at the nation's hearth and home, The justice long delayed is done. Not as we hoped, in calm of prayer, the message of deliverance comes, but heralded by roll of drums on waves of battle-troubled air. With sounds that madden and appall, the song that Bethlehem shepherds knew, the harp of David melting through the demon agonies of Saul. Not as we hoped, but what are we? Above our broken dreams and plans, God lays with wiser hand than man's the cornerstones of liberty. I cavil not with him. The voice that freedom's blessed gospel tells is sweet to me as silver bells. Rejoicing, yea, I will rejoice. Dear friends still toiling in the sun, ye dearer ones who gone before are watching from the eternal shore the slow work by our hands begun. Rejoice with me, the chastening rod blossoms with love. The furnace heat grows cool beneath his blessed feet, whose form is as the Son of God. Rejoice, our Marah's bitter springs are sweetened on our ground of grief. Rise day by day in strong relief, the prophecies of better things. Rejoice in hope, the day and night are one with God and one with them, who see by faith the cloudy hem of judgment fringed with mercy's light. Thank you. Thank you yet again. You're too kind. Elizabeth Barrett Browning said, truth outlives pain, as the soul does life. There is a lot of truth in Langston Hughes' poem, Democracy. Democracy will not come today, this year, nor ever, through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want freedom, just as you. Again, thank you. Thank you, folks. All right, where are we now? The American sculptor, Hiram Powers, and his family were among the few intimate friends of the Brownings during their first years in Florence. Moved by Hiram's sculpture, The Greek Slave, Elizabeth wrote the following poem bearing the same title. They say, ideal beauty cannot enter the house of anguish. On the threshold stands an alien image with enshackled hands, called the Greek slave, as if the artist meant her, that passionless perfection which he lent her, shadowed, not darkened, where the sill expands. To so confront man's crimes in different lands, with man's ideal sense, pierce to the center, art's fiery finger, and break up ere long the serfdom of this world. Appeal, fair stone, from God's pure heights of beauty against man's wrong. Catch up in thy divine face not alone. East griefs but west, and strike and shame the strong, by thunders of white silence overthrown. Thank you again. Now let me ask, are you guys familiar with the statue of the Greek slave? Are you guys familiar? Anybody? No? Really? Okay. It's a wonderful piece of art. On one hand, the nude image is attractive, but in contrast, ugly shackles bind her. Okay, so in lieu of obtaining the image on the net, James is going to imitate it right now. Right, James? James, are you going to imitate the Greek statue? James.
I'm here.
Yeah, are you going to imitate the Greek statue right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we rehearsed, right? Didn't we rehearse it that way? Okay. All right. So with that said, let's move on. There, very good. Yes. Thank you, James.
We did not rehearse that.
No, we did not. Of course not. It's called a joke.
Okay.
Okay. But anyway, it's a beautiful statue, but obviously the disturbing aspect is the fact that this poor young lady has been shackled by the oppressive system of that time. Very good, James. Well done. Cheers. Now, if you could just make the screen go back to the way it was, perfect. Okay, that works out perfectly. Thank you, James. Let's see now. Now, although Spaniards in Puerto Rico conquered, enslaved, and through torture as well as diseases, drove the Taíno Indians to near extinction, those indigenous voices live on in folktales, songs, and poems. That form of immortality through art reminds me of this Elizabeth Barrett Browning quote: "When the dust of death has choked a great man's voice, the common words he said turn oracles, the common thoughts he yoked like horses, draw like griffins." Edna Garcia, novelist and poet, gives those Taíno people life again through words. Let's take a moment to listen. Edna, are you ready? Come on, let's give Edna a round of applause, folks. Come on. Thank you. Get an opportunity to hear another voice, better than mine.
This poem is called Colibri, which means hummingbird in Spanish. It was written by a former lawyer and poet, Martín Espada, and he addresses the colonization of Puerto Rican people. Okay. In Jayuya, that is the name of a town in Puerto Rico. In Jayuya, the lizard scatters like a fleet of green canoes before the invader. The Spanish conquer with iron and words. Taíno, for the people who took life from the plátanos in the trees, those multiple green fingers curling around unseen spheres, who left the rock carvings of eyes and mouth in perfect circles of amazement. So the hummingbird was christened Colibri. Now the colibri darts and bangs between the white walls of the hacienda, erasing Taíno heart, frantic, as if hearing the bellowing god of gunpowder for the first time. The colibri becomes pure stillness, seized in the paralysis of the prey, when your hands cup the bird and lifting throughout the red shutters of the window, where he disappears into a paradise of sky, a night full of singing frogs, if only history were like your hands. Thank you. You want me to share my second poem?
Yes, by all means.
Okay. A second poem that I have is by, I really like this one, is by Rick Kearns. He's a poet and a freelance writer, musician who lives in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And he called it That Was It, the Missing Taíno. It is not easy for me to say I am a stranger in this wide world, but I am. I awoke one day, rainbow Boricua white boy floating in a suburb, feeling the need to explode, looking for the right mirror, and none of the mainstream labels seemed to fit. I found the marrow of the matter solely by chance. My white ancestors, Scots, German, Irish, helped build this glorious monstrosity, giving us more free time and faster transportation, quicker communication, so we can send words to more people we will never meet and help each other build more walls, more privacy, until we are all completely alone together. They are my people too. The roots of my tree also go back to España, gypsy mother, Roman father of passionate faith and dignity and blinding greed. Conquistadors took Taino African concubines and begat Puerto Rico, reinforcing the notion that slavery begins at home and love, race, suppression, and servitude begat farmers who lived in music and the heat of tropical sunny colonial slavery with a twist. They are my family as well. And I walk among these cousins apart and watching a visitor in somebody else's museum. Not to say that there were not connections there, where are many, many of great strengths. No, nothing so simple as all that. I often felt I was inside a cave, at home in subways, alleys, basements, dark forests. None of this had a name until the family secret was accidentally released. I always wanted stories. Impossibly curious 12-year-olds always wanting family stories. Quiz my grandparents, uncles, cousins, and my beleaguered parents until one day, my mother shot a laser through the fog. Well, mijo, my beloved mother conceded, yes, hijo, your abuelo's family had Taino blood, but it's so far back, so far away. The Tainos are extinct, mijo. Our family is from Spain. That was it. That made sense. All of a sudden, it had a name. It had a name. Taino, Taino. I would mutter to myself, and it remained my secret. I knew what was in the books. The word in the books was extinct, death of disease and genocide, and I knew all that, but Taino did not feel dead to me. Taino ancestors explained my love for the earth in a way that cannot be translated into English or Spanish. These epiphanies came in waves, knocked me out of linear language, expression, and state just below the surface. Then the waves came again. Many years later, I rode in a truck, in a train, in a subway, emerged into the light, out of the cave into the East Harlem, barrio Fifth Avenue, the poor end of Museum Row and El Museo del Barrio. Taino celebration, elation to see dancers and photos, sacred objects, and Taino faces. It was uplifting and confusing, causing outrageous battle with my linear mind, telling me, look at your Irish friend and your Celtic name, and look in the mirror, and I caught my reflection in the glass of a case surrounding a semi, and I saw myself smiling. This is it, Taino, you make sense. This is it, my secret no longer. This is it, the missing piece of my puzzle. And I am complete. I am complete. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very well done. Very well done. Come on, guys. You guys agree? Absolutely. Absolutely. Edna, thank you for sharing those profound poetical words. I can see why you were a great high school teacher. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Now, centuries ago, during the Industrial Revolution, children learned different lessons. They worked harder than mules and endured abuse, while others profited off their labor. Angered by the policies of factories and mines in England, Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote The Cry of the Children. This heart-wrenching excerpt best expresses the writer's indignation. Do you hear the children weeping? and disproving. Oh, my brothers, what ye preach, for God's possible is taught by his world's loving, and the children doubt of each. And well may the children weep before you. They are weary, they run. They have never seen the sunshine nor the glory, which is brighter than the sun. They know the grief of man, but not the wisdom. They sink in man's despair without its calm, are slaves without the liberty in Christendom, are martyrs by the pang without the palm, are worn as if with age, yet unretrievingly, no dear remembrance keep, or orphans of the earthly love and heavenly. Let them weep, let them weep. They look up with their pale and sunken faces, and their look is dread to see, for they mind you of the angels in their places, with eyes meant for deity. How long, they say, how long, O cruel nation, will you stand to move the world on a child's heart? Stifle down with mailed heel its palpitation, and tread onward to your throne amid the mocked. Our blood splashes upward, oh, our tyrants, and your purple shows your path, where the child's sob curseth deeper in the silence than a strong man in his wrath. Thank you. Many people do not want certain historical atrocities taught in classrooms. These critics believe such lessons make students uncomfortable. However, the naysayers fail to realize no one designed the curriculum to shame any group. Quite simply, the data informs people about what took place throughout the world. Moreover, the information edifies generations about the dangers of repeating history. Aside from that, the students learn how to empathize with the plight of others. Elizabeth Barrett Browning understood the importance of didacticism. By using poetic words, she taught generations the gospel of love and respect for all people. That much needed lesson requires iteration every time prejudice in homes tries to indoctrinate young minds. Knowing full well that bias gets taught in homes, I wrote the following poem titled Students of Their Insanity. The students' minds were pages awaiting moral text. What they got was acrimony's alphabet from adults. These adults felt A represented aversion, and the last letter was for zealotry. The students' minds were pages awaiting moral text. What they got was lessons in antagonism's annals from bullies who beat them the way slaves got beaten and tortured them the way hostages got tortured. The students' minds were pages awaiting moral text. What they got was prejudice, tutoring them proprietarily. These days, the students are fluent in hate, possessing an old bigot's vulgarism. The students' minds were pages awaiting moral text. What they got was the globe's most itinerant pandemic beneath African, Asiatic, and Caucasic faces. The students' minds were pages awaiting moral text. What they got was a tassel-headed graduation and a welcome to the ever battlesome world. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Give me a moment to catch my breath. Like a pedagogue, history teaches some hard lessons. That knowledge can help us rebuild this planetary abode. Perhaps by remembering these words from Elizabeth, we can make the world beautiful. Earth may embitter, not remove. the love divinely given, and e'en that mortal grief shall prove the immortality of love and lead us nearer heaven. Again, I thank you. Thankfully, this sentiment of working towards the world's betterment through love is alive in a young poet named Amanda Gorman. These lines from The Hill We Climb prove that fact. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from our bronze-pounded chests, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and dutiful, will emerge battered but beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. Thank you. Thank you all. In conclusion, I'm grateful that the New York Browning Society was brave enough to let an old social justice warrior like me share another poetic lecture. Furthermore, I'm grateful that you, the viewers, were brave enough to hear one modest man's take on history. I thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bob,
Yes.
who wrote that poem about students? Was that you or Edna?
Well, guilty as charged. It is I. And Underground
Okay.
Books was kind enough to publish this chapbook, Verses of Realness.
Okay.
Thank you. What did you think of it, sir? What did you think of it, sir?
I think it was to the point, crisp, clear, and vital.
Very good. Thank you. Glad to hear that. Okay. Anyone else want to offer some feedback?
I think that
Yes.
your comment about history is very well taken, and I think that when we, well, I don't know if it's you, the term reappraisal, but when we go back and revisit and look at other aspects of history that have not been taught, it's not only the oppression, but figures in history that have been marginalized, that have not been brought to their proper place, recognition for various reasons. And what I find very interesting when I bring those up is there are all sorts of reasons. They're obviously race, gender, those are some. But what is amazing is how people who have been oppressed nevertheless achieved amazing things for which they were not recognized. And I think when we bring that up as well as the oppression, we also give people inspiration. I mean, a lot of people say that in today's world, people, they'll say that this generation doesn't really know what labor is, when you think 200, 300 years ago, what it took to wash clothes, what it took to, and even for the privilege, it was comfortable, certainly compared to servants and slaves. But travel, for example, even if you could afford it, you bumped along the prairie in a stagecoach for weeks, knee to knee with the people. It was not pleasant. People avoided travel if they could, you didn't travel.
I remember it very well.
Yeah.
Oh, you're taking me back.
Yeah, and so I think that bringing, bringing these aspects of history, not just the oppression, but also the achievement over in spite of oppression, is amazing. I mean, it's beyond, it's almost unfathomable. There's a woman named Clara Brown who was born a slave, and her family was sold away from her, but I think her second master must have been, what do they call it? Bipolar or something, because he made arrangements for their emancipation upon his death, but he sold the family out from under them during his lifetime. And so when she was manumitted in the 1830s, and in an effort to try to find her, she didn't know where any of her children were, and some were reported dead, as was her husband, but there was one daughter that she kept trying to find, and she thought she was in Colorado, so she joined an expedition that was headed for the gold rush, and became their cook and their laundress, and and she ended up setting up the first commercial laundry in Colorado. She did finally reunite with her daughter in Iowa, not in Colorado, but in the meantime, she helped many freed families after the Civil War settle. And it was, I mean, not that much is known about her, but it's an incredible story.
And that's why it's our job to bring this information to the fore. Right.
Exactly. So, not only the realities of the oppression, but how people manage to overcome that. And I think another thing that's important, people will ask, to this day, how did Hitler come to power? Well, if you look at what Germany was like after World War I, and, I know my students, some of them said they never could envision Germany as being poor. Germany, the Treaty of Versailles absolutely crushed Germany. And it was in a very vulnerable spot. I mean, for a leader like Hitler, he brought benefits to Germany. He didn't come out with a placard saying, I'm going to kill 6 million Jews. He didn't, he brought benefits to Germany, then constructed a scapegoat. So, I mean, it becomes these leaders that are notorious and evil have also done things that endear people to. I mean, that's, yeah. And that happens during times when people are in need. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that also is extremely important, because, we always want to believe we'd be on the right side of
history.
Of history. We would never be slave owners. We would never have collaborated with the Nazis. We would never, we wouldn't have done that. Of course we wouldn't. Well, I mean, depends on where you were at the time and what you knew and what you didn't know. And that gets back, I think, to what you're talking about, the biases, and how it's very important to bring in other aspects, because people, we always want to feel like we would have done the right thing, but it's very interesting, because I got a chance to speak with the grandson of the, as I say, the real no longer alive Maria von Trapp of Trapp family, Sound of Music fame, and their actual story is, well, I mean, I love the movie myself, but their actual story is really quite something.
Quite different.
But the grandson said that he always wanted to talk to the people who stayed behind, because he realized that his grandparents, they actually were not wealthy by the time they left. They had become somewhat bankrupt, but they still had the name, and they were known. They performed throughout Europe, and they had Italian passports. So they didn't hike over the mountains in Jesuits. When they got on the train, looked like they were going hiking in Italy, which they often did, and they just didn't come back. But they had the means to do that, and they had traveled around enough, and they had heard enough about Hitler that there were people who probably heard things but didn't know what to do. I mean, they couldn't leave, and they didn't know what to do, and it doesn't excuse anything, but we all want to feel like, yeah, Lucy says, like Canada, we all want to feel like we would have done the right thing, and we hope we would, but you never know, depending on where you are. Which I think is just very important. By the way, and to sort of underscore this, there was and this was written into the film, but in a different way. There's an interview with the actual Maria, and she talks about how during the time, because they were in Austria for about 10 years. I mean, they didn't leave when they were children, in the real but she said night after night, none of the family liked Hitler. I mean, they said he was vulgar, he was crude, he was just, they just couldn't stand him. And so night after night, they talked about this at the dinner table. This went on and on and on and on. And one night, the butler approached the captain and said, "Sir, I need to speak with you privately." They went into the next room. He turned his lapel over. There was a swastika. He said, "I feel it is my duty to inform you that I am a member of the party. But he never turned them in. They know he never turned them in because Hitler would have had a crosshair on them. He was, I mean, they were famous enough, but which made you might have advantage in some ways, but vulnerable in others. And that's another aspect of it. I mean, this man was a Nazi, a committed Nazi, but boy, he risked his life by not turning them in.
Understood.
That doesn't make him good, or bad, or, but all of these shades of compliance and non-compliance, and the deeper you get into hearing people's stories, their narratives, it is a very complex thing, more
Yeah,
than
that's
we
why
would
these
like to
lessons
think.
have to be taught. So this way
Absolutely.
children will
Absolutely.
understand the
Absolutely.
oppression that the world
That's right.
perpetrated throughout history.
That's right.
Our goal, at least one of our goals, is to make children understand that these things can never be repeated. You cannot allow for these atrocities to ever take place again.
That's right.
All right, so let me open up the forum to a few more folks. Herb, would you like to share?
Yes, I like the poem and the subject of child labor.
Yes.
And it reminded me of what I've learned about a so-called hero of individualism, John Locke.
Yes.
Yeah, now John Locke said that children ought to start working at age 3 to get them used to the harsh realities of work and accept it. He also talked about them. He and many others had this theory of the tabula rasa, that there was nothing there and you could make of it whatever you wanted. And that's what he was doing.
Right.
And I would contrast him as an Enlightenment figure with another Enlightenment figure, Leibniz. And Leibniz believed that the individual had infinite depth, that the closer you looked in on his life and his autobiography, as if you were taking a zoom, into the details, the fine details, that you would see so much. It is endless. And so, in other words, he had respect for what the individual was, and Locke did not.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well said. What do you think of the program? Did I do a good job? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Herb, you were saying? Did I do a good job?
You brought it to life, that she was outraged and that this whole society should be outraged, that children who are the least able to defend themselves were being the most taken advantage of for what they could cheaply be gotten for. So it was a form of slavery.
Gotcha. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So should I take that as a compliment?
Bob.
Should I take that as a compliment? I'm sorry, I can't hear her.
Yeah, it's a compliment that all these themes were woven into that.
Very good.
Yeah, and so I felt, just as a summation, that I felt like you were giving us a tour of history in a poetic way. In other words, you were going from this island to that island to that island, but they were all connected, and people, it's like a torch being passed, and all the way to Amanda Gorman. And I for one, just thoroughly enjoyed that trip.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Herb. That means a lot. I mean, I really appreciate your opinions. Anybody else want to share something from? Hold on. I think James wants to interrupt me because we're over our time. Correct?
I'm not interrupting you all. I'm the moderator, so it makes it a lot easier for me to ask the questions for other people. So
yes, you're absolutely right. I'm taking over all the roles right now. Right.
I understand that you don't have
audience member.
You don't have to do. Right. You don't have to do that.
Right. And I'm also working the concession stand.
Sure. The one thing that I would like to say, and we can open it up for discussion in 1 second, but I'm a little tired of the social justice and the Elizabeth Barrett Browning talks. I think this is our 4th one. This
Is
season.
that right? Is that right? But not like mine. Not like mine.
No, you did really good. You did really good. And I already defended earlier in this speech, and I'll do it again. But I just wanted to say that, Elizabeth Barrett Browning was one of the first prominent individual abolitionists and feminists of our time. And as one of the top selling poets in the world, she was the first one to really bring light onto these subjects, to bring that beautiful spotlight onto the plight of the slaves. Thus, the refrain in the Runaway Slave at Pilgrim Point is to write. So she was inviting us to write. She was wanting other people to write about these causes, to write about this and that. And that was in a period of time when people actually still read. She happened to be the #1 read poet in the world at the time.
Absolutely, wanted her to be poet laureate.
And her putting her attention to this cause is something that I don't think that should be revisited or reevaluated or criticized, because without her standing up, there would have been, it gave courage. Without her courage, it gave courage to other people to stand up, and the ball started moving, and we actually ended slavery. And so, slavery had existed the entire human history. This is not something that is within the last 200, 300 years, but because people's ability to understand history is so limited to like yesterday's news, their opinion of slavery is relegated to their own media experience of it at this point. So so when you were saying that there's shades of colors, or when Nancy was saying that there's shades of complicity, it's not that, it's shades of humanity. And humanity, so what really makes me upset is when people say, well, that man was a monster, or Adolf Hitler was a no, they were men, they were humans. See, so when you start to take the human element out of it, that's when you have a failure to realize where this really happens, how this does happens. And when you said that this can never happen again, I disagree. I think that this will happen continuously, and this earth will continue for a long time. So, we learn from our past, and we can make our own ability to treat our own our lives the way that we do, and to treat other people with respect and dignity. And I think that's really what we're lacking right now, is a sense of dignity. So that's my opinion on the talk. I'm really not a big social justice guy. I'm for everybody. I'm go team everybody. So I thought it was really good. What do you say, Herb?
I'd like to ask Bob McNeil a question.
Yep. I don't know the answer. I'll save you some time right now.
Do you have any insight into the bit of an obsession that Elizabeth Barrett Browning had, that she was part Black? And which she said in a letter to Robert when he was courting her, and in other letters and diary entries, she occasionally mentioned it. And do you think that, I mean, it seems obvious, but who knows? Do you think that was something that really motivated her in her justice work, or is that just incidental, or?
It's a very good question. Okay, I'm not a geneticist. I don't know about the deoxyribonucleic.
Right, we don't really know. We don't really know. We know that she believed. We know that she believed that.
Right.
Whether it's true or not is another question.
We know that her father believed that. That's the reason why he forbade all of his children from having sexual relationships.
So he may have planted that in her.
He was the one that planted that in their heads, because he was the one who forbade them from even dating. And that's why it was such a scandal in their own household that Robert had to, basically steal her away in the middle of the night. So, yeah, there's definitely an issue there that they were concerned that they, had been a part of the, that had some sort of Black, heritage.
I think James answered that adequately, but, does it really matter? At the end of the day?
At that time, socially, it made a big difference.
No, undoubtedly, but it doesn't affect the importance of the poetry that she created one way or the other. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but there's also in the field, if you will, of identity politics.
This is getting good.
If she indeed is part Black, couldn't she be an important figure in a way for African Americans?
The Gorman of her time,
a cultural figure for them.
I'm going to have to say you're going to need to have this conversation with a better mind than mine. I'm going to have to concede that.
All right. Okay. All right. I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
The best I can say is deoxyribonucleic acid really doesn't play a part in the greatness of her poetry. as far as I'm concerned.
And I don't
James-
think it plays a part in anybody's poetry.
Right. Well, not in her case, really. I mean, in the sense that she was moved to write about the plight of others, regardless of what her racial background happened to be. I think that's what we really need to bear in mind.
Yep, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else would like to weigh in on this
Yeah.
one?
I just wanted to say, not specifically on this one, although I agree with you, Bob, that in this case, particularly because her life was not that, also her life was not that of a slave, right? Her life was not. So
Exactly.
there was, I mean,
I don't know. She was enslaved
as
in
a
her
woman,
house for 40
okay,
years.
As a woman, yeah. Well, yeah, that's true.
Well, it's not
Okay,
quite
so
the same as field workers.
Well, but it could have given her some additional sense of empathy, but no, I was going to say, getting back to the specific history and what James was saying, that you're right, the same thing goes with, Hitler was a man, okay, he did evil things. He did, we don't want to say now that he did some good things, but as I said, he brought benefits to war-destroyed Germany, and German people needed benefits, and he did that. I mean, and so when people say, how did he get to that degree of power, that people, were taken in by him. But I was going to say also, it's the other side is true too. The people that conventionally have been upheld as heroes they were people. And so that's why, we have Thomas Jefferson, who has been reappraised. But he wrote the Declaration of Independence, and we say, what a hypocrite. But we also know this man was a visionary. He thought in the abstract. And when you learn other things about him, it's not exactly surprising that he would detach himself from his own reality to write the Declaration of Independence. So, do you throw out the Declaration of Independence because of who wrote it? The Declaration, now there's, people will say that unfettered liberty becomes inimical to equality, and that's no doubt true. But again, it was his vision. I mean, so that's one thing. Woodrow Wilson with his 14 points, and oh my gosh, I mean, he was about as sexist, from everything I've read, sexist, racist, everything. But he wrote 14 points. So do we discard the good works that come from these people? Just like,
No.
we have to see them as humans. We have to see them as humans who made some good contributions, but we're short-sighted in many other ways.
Okay,
I would say the answer is clear. I'd say the answer is clearly no. Up until a certain point, most people in America were very anti drug usage, especially with needles. Now it's become very popular to take needle drugs. But like, if I was to say I'm anti-heroin, would I have to throw out my vinyl collection? Right. If I said I was anti-alcoholism, would I have to throw out my book collection? I mean, I think that the work should stand on its own, because the man is the person that produced it, and that guy's gone, way gone. So why do we have to deal with? Why do we have to cancel somebody that's already dead?
I'm glad you used that word. Okay. The reason why cancel culture is so prevalent today is because people are fed up with seeing offensive images. Now, let's get something straight. Let me preface my statement by saying I harbor no prejudice against any specific group, okay? The same way Jews respond to seeing a swastika is the same way Blacks respond to seeing a Confederate flag. It's offensive. And it is important that every generation says to the last one, "Oh, Lazarus, why aren't you dead?" Because we have to get rid of the past. We have to move on. If the past happens to be ugly, we have to destroy it. That is the responsibility
how do we not repeat it?
Every generation. We do not venerate tyrants. Yes, they were human beings, but they were tyrannical human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They were despotical human beings. They were opprobrious human beings. You always have to add those other adjectives when talking about human beings that are willing to enslave, to oppress, to destroy other human beings. We do not venerate these people in a civilized society. Okay?
I'm saying, wait.
Hold on, James.
You said eliminate the past. You said eliminate the past.
I'm talking about statues, flags,
I'm not.
things of that nature. I'm talking about those things.
I'm
and
saying
those things have to be removed from public view because they are a source of offense. Now, hold on. in keeping with that same subject, we cannot destroy literature as a result of offense.
Well, why not?
Shakespeare wrote
You're
some-
already on the
No,
slippery
you're not
slope.
allowing me to finish, James. Shakespeare wrote some very offensive things about women, wrote some very offensive things about blacks. But I am not going to burn Shakespeare's work as a result of that, because he wrote great things. Hemingway was a misogynist, an anti-Semite, a bully, a horrible person, but we still will read Hemingway. That is our choice. However, a statue in a park removes the choice from an individual circumambulating. The choice has been taken away. If I see a Confederate flag in a public building, my choice has been taken away because I find that offensive. I take umbrage to such an image. Such an image should burn. Robert E. Lee should burn in effigy. All the Confederates should burn in effigy.
Do you
They
say
were
that as
despicable
opposed
individuals,
to?
opprobrious individuals, the worst individuals you could possibly make. I can carve a better human being out of a pile of garbage. And I do not need to see those images in a public place. However, if I want to read the work of a Southern writer who supported the Confederates, that is my prerogative to walk into a library, to do so. That's a choice. But I do not need to see the image of a Confederate in a public place because I find that offensive. Do you see the difference in cancel culture now?
No, I'm
What
saying that this
about-
is a poetry,
Wait,
this is a
hold on,
poetry
hold on, hold on.
lecture
I don't
about
want you to
literature and
dominate,
history.
moderator.
No one brought that
Nancy,
up.
you got something? I'm sorry, James?
I said this was a lecture on poetry and
Yes.
literature and history.
Absolutely.
And so no one brought all this other stuff up. So I just
No, it's
wanted to say
okay.
that's
It's
your
okay.
personal
It's beautiful.
opinions and you're entitled to them. But I'm just trying to say that a good example, what's his face? You don't see a statue of him, but Norman Mailer, right? He was a horrible guy, right? But at one point he was the Hemingway of his particular
But
time.
again,
And
you're
he's
missing
just
my
now
point,
canceled.
James. You have the right to go into a library in a democratic society and get the work of Norman Mailer, and I would suggest that you do so because he was a great writer. But to venerate the figure in a statue where everybody will see, which will cause offense, is a different story. They're not comparable.
Okay, I just didn't, no one brought up statue but you. That's all I'm saying.
But
I
I mean,
didn't.
obviously, I'm talking about that because that's a part of cancel culture. That's why statues are being removed. That's why Theodore Roosevelt was removed as a result of cancel culture. People did not want to see him next to an indigenous person and an African on a horse.
That was a beautiful
As if he was a
statue.
great white leader. Nobody wants to see that in the 21st century, James. Nobody wants to
Listen,
see
I
that.
think we're,
But
I think
students
we're
have
getting
the
away
right to
from,
go into libraries to get the work of Theodore Roosevelt, to get his speeches, to get anything about him. That is your choice. But I don't want to see a statue about him.
Well,
Again,
what
you
about-
should burn an effigy.
Okay, no, what about
McNeil.
putting those statues in a gallery in a museum? Then you have the choice not to go
Yeah.
into that gallery.
And that's what they did. That's what they did in Prague. Whenever they removed
I
all the
think that
Soviet
yeah.
statues, they put them into a Soviet, they had a
Yeah.
whole, they kept the statue.
Then you can view
Because
them.
these are works
and
of art.
here's- Yeah, the other
But
thing I would
dubious
say.
works of art,
Okay,
James.
well,
James,
okay. Could I say
James,
something about the work of art business? Yeah, just one thing I just wanted to add on that is that for example, now if you go to the Truman Museum and Library in Independence, Missouri, one thing I really admire about those curators, they do not withhold aspects of Truman's administration that were not laudable. Among them, the caricatures of Japanese, because it was World War II and there was this globalization. Okay, they're out there. They're not out there so people can admire them. They're out there so people can see them. Now, you cannot go into that gallery. They don't have a wonderful tribute to it. They just have them there and they speak for themselves. And what I appreciate about the candor of that is that you can see for yourself. They don't applaud Truman at the same time. They just say this was part of, he did not stop it. It was, I guess he figured it would have violated the First Amendment. Now we can debate the First Amendment. But the point is, I think, so, I mean, I would agree with you about having them on boulevards, avenues, parks, but if they are put into museums, then people can choose, as you're saying, choose to read, choose to go into that gallery, say no, that even going in that gallery is too offensive, or you can go in and you can see them, not to applaud them, but to say, this is a part of history we don't want to repeat.
Sequester
Yeah.
them.
So
So
that was
this
good.
way,
Yeah.
you don't have to offend everybody as
Right,
they
right.
make their way through
My
the day.
only caveat with you, Bob, in your statements was is that you said that
Only one?
because you contradicted yourself in the sense that you said that these things that have happened can never happen again, And then you said we must delete or get rid of the
I
past.
didn't say that, James. I'm
So
not
what
a
I'm saying is you said
prognosticator.
you wanted to get rid of the past,
No, 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 no,
to
no, no,
erase
no, no.
the bad, evil history that we have.
James, I'm not
What
a
I'm trying to say
prognosticator.
is that you can't not know when you cut your link to the past, then you have really no compass to the future.
Okay, so what I was saying was that students should learn about history, so we do not repeat history. That was my statement. I cannot predict the future. Had I predicted the future, I would have invested a lot more money in rap. But my point is, all jokes aside, is that
I'm sorry.
that's perfectly right. We
Yeah,
want
I'm sorry.
students to understand the full spectrum of history, but at the same time, we do not want them to repeat the atrocities of the past. Does that make sense?
Well, that's up to them. This whole parental, it is up to the future generation to decide the history. Like, who are we to be so pretentious to say that I can make something out of a piece of garbage that looks better than Theodore Roosevelt statue? I mean,
James, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't want to say anything so much, Jeff. I
I
do
can carve out a
apologize.
better human being out of a piece of garbage than Theodore Roosevelt. That I can attest. That I can say unequivocally. I can mold a better human being out of a piece of garbage.
Can I just say this real quickly? My
Yes,
battery
please.
is going fast. And
Okay,
so
I'm sorry.
if I sign off, I don't want anybody to think that I'm upset by this conversation and I'm
No,
leaving or
please.
something. I'm not walking out. My battery may die and I may have to leave you. I've said more than enough, more than my share probably. But I just want to say this because if my battery goes, I don't want anybody to think that nothing has offended me so that I've signed off. It's strictly a dead battery. And this has been wonderful. I just want to say that. Excuse me
Thank
for
you.
interrupting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well said.
yeah,
Thank
and
you.
discourse
And I
is
hope you
always
all agree.
appreciated.
Okay. All right. So let's end on this. I sincerely hope you enjoyed
Yes.
the program, folks. By a show of thumbs.